Hey, what's going on, folks? We have a great show for you today, and I have a special guest joining me to talk about it. Russian and Ukraine war is heating up, with Russia attacking Ukraine, striking it with missiles, and retaliating for what they called a terrorist attack on a bridge in Crimea, on which it seems like somebody Ukrainian set off some sort of fire or explosion. Now, Biden is promising Zelensky advanced air defense systems after Russian attacks earlier today, and we're going to talk about the whole Ukraine-Russia conflict from the beginning and what the media doesn't want to talk about. In order to find peace, we need to tell the truth. That's for sure. And before we start, I just want to show you this clip from Joe Rogan, where the co-founder of the Rolling Stone says he essentially wants to censor the internet. Let's listen and react after.
To regulate the internet?
Absolutely.
You trust the people that got us into the Iraq war under false pretenses to regulate the internet? Do you think that makes any sense?
Well, wait a minute. I would not. The people who got us into the Iraq war
It's the government.
was the politicians.
It's the government.
In the end, yes, it's the government. But who else is going to regulate?
But if they're going to
Joe,
be in power and they're regulating the internet, they're going to regulate the internet in a way that suits their best interests.
No,
The
but-
same way they do with the banking industry, the same way they do with the environment, the same way they do with energy, the same way they do with everything.
No,
What represents their interests? There's you're talking about so much money involved in disseminating information in a
and
very
the richest
particular
companies
way.
in the world are, right now are the internet companies are rich beyond belief.
Yeah, it's fat, but it's a disruptive thing that has never existed before. I think it exists, and I think where we're at is where we're at. I think we need to move forward collectively as a country with an ethic that respects truth and that appreciates opinions and reality and an understanding of things that's not necessarily possible with corporate interest involved in the dissemination of information.
But there's no way to do that except through the government. There's no way that you can do that except through the government.
Why is that?
Human nature is not going to change.
But the government's not going to change either.
But the government is capable of change. Okay, look, the government regulates, for example, the food supply, or it can regulate. Let's take the
food supply.
Yeah, the Department of Agriculture.
Why have they let
Health Safety.
glyphosate infestate all of our foods?
Let's take with one thing.
Yeah, but that's a problem. That's the
I
government
agree.
regulating.
Well, then we better get better politicians in them to appoint better people. I mean, it's not again. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Right.
Okay. So let's take the SEC or take the Food and Drug Administration, which regulates big pharma. On the one hand, we've got a very safe supply of drugs in this country.
Safe?
Drugs are tested. You don't get too many bad drugs. Prescribed drugs.
25% of all drugs approved by the FDA get recalled.
The show starts now.
The Dream Rare Podcast, welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles. It's the Dream Rare Podcast, welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles. Yeah.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Dream Rare Podcast. I'm here with a special guest today, Clint from Liberty Lockdown. Thanks for joining.
What's up, brother? Thank you for having me, man. Lots to talk about, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the Russia-Ukraine thing escalating, but first we're going to talk about something that on a world scale probably matters a lot less, but it's a little bit easier and more fun to talk about. Actually, that's not true. Censoring the internet is pretty crazy. So what do you think about that clip? My first thoughts when I was hearing it was, I always wonder who the fact checkers are and these people that want to censor the internet. Like, they must be really smart. They must be intellectual giants that understand stuff that I don't understand, where it's like, no, it's right. We got to let that guy close up the internet. But listening to this bumbling fool, I'm like, that's exactly what I would think someone who wants to shut down the internet sounds like. Like, that's not an expert by any means.
No, it's not. And you got to remember, too, I mean, he's the founder of Rolling Stone. I don't know if he has editorial control, but hilarious that he put the Boston Marathon bomber on the cover of Rolling Stone, all sexy style, like he's Jim Morrison. I don't know if you remember that, but
no, I don't.
Yeah, dude, you got to check it out. Anyways, it's yeah, I mean, Joe thankfully pushed back exactly how you should. It's like it's such a bizarre disconnect that liberals have when they talk about human nature. He goes like, well, human nature is not going to change, as if the government isn't just human beings.
Right.
It's very strange that they don't connect those dots. It's like they honestly perceive the government to be this moral entity that sits above us all, and it's just not reality.
Right. And they know, and in a weird way, it's almost like they have to know it's not, because they don't like Trump. They don't like Republicans. Like, who do you think the government is? They're a huge, sometimes they're more than half of the government and more than half of the Supreme Court. And then he says, well, people won't change. And Joe's like, he says, it's not the government, it's politicians. It's like, Joe's like, the politicians are the government, bro. Like,
Yeah,
what,
man.
what is the government? Like, it's this like, oh, it's just like a wall that sits there, like the Abe Lincoln statue glows and starts levitating. It's like, dude, the government is the politicians making the decisions, and we're supposed to vote them in. So the fact that he said it's not the governments who got us into the Iraq War, it's the politicians.
Well, that's the whole reason that the government is simply supposed to protect our liberties, and that's the extent that, I mean, the American ideal, that's what we were supposed to have it established to do. But now there's this belief that they can not just indoctrinate but enforce moralistic principles across the board that go above, just protecting life and property, and it's been disastrous. I mean, so much so that they're now of the belief they can change the temperature of the earth, and they can regulate the food supply. I mean, the fact that he's bringing up, FDA and the Department of Agriculture as examples of government victories is just unreal.
Hey, my favorite conspiracy theory, like I'm not actually into conspiracy theories like the media might claim I am, but my favorite one, the one that I think is the funniest, is the conspiracy theory that Justin Trudeau, Joe Biden, Klaus Schwab, and all of these merry band of left-wing people are capable of changing the climate of Earth. And I'm not saying the climate won't change. I'm not a climate change denier. I think the climate changes all the time. I have to think this is the new theory of the media, the blue anon conspiracy theory, that you have to believe that Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden are going to change the climate, or you're the conspiracy theorist. Joe Biden probably can't even tie his own shoes, but he's going to shift the entire reality of Earth via, a policy that only his country and a few others follow, and China and India don't actually even have to listen to.
Well, there's a litany of problems that we've been presented with over the past couple decades, and every time the answer is to give them more money and control. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And whatever your belief is about climate change, it's really secondary to the point of, do you think these people can remedy it? And the answer is obviously no.
Right. Before we move on, I know you said you listened to the whole podcast. Was that guy as dumb as he sounded in that 2-minute clip? Like, were all of his policies that dumb?
I would say at minimum that dumb. He actually exceeded it at times. It is one of the best 3 hours I've spent listening to a podcast, just because I'm a sadist and I really like listening to people that I disagree with deeply.
Right.
But it's just 3 hours. It's a 3-hour marathon of that guy, like, continuously upping the ante of stupidity. Really a great example of a liberal just putting their foot in their mouth over and over again. And fortunately, even though I disagree with Joe on a couple of things politically, he wasn't having it for the most part. I mean, obviously, I agree with this guy when it comes to like avoiding wars and things like that. Some of the good points that liberals do make, but broadly, yeah, he's out of his mind.
Right. I have a theory that they want to censor the internet because in a free market of competition, they're not actually good. It would be like, I used this example yesterday. I'm better than LeBron James. Like, are you go play him one-on-one? No. He's a racist. I got to ban him off the courts because he's a bad guy. It's like, you sure you can beat him? Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. But you don't want to play him. No. So like, usually people like this guy, he doesn't talk to people like Joe Rogan on a platform. He usually talks amongst his friends and wants to censor everyone out. But the second his ideas get to hit the sunlight, it's like, ew, that sucks, dude. It is, censor everybody. Like that's what I think is going on in their head.
It's absolutely bizarre too, because he has to recognize that his platform, having the capacity to publish and have millions of people read whatever he wants them to read, is privileged in his language. So if you see that and you understand that people that don't have your platform would also like to have their voices heard, how can you not see that as an incredibly elitist mentality to hold? And it's bizarre, because the same people that despair over income inequality and disparate outcomes for racial minorities and things like that, they don't identify this obvious corollary where if you censor people that don't have a platform like the Rolling Stone magazine, well, then you're the only voice that gets to be heard. And isn't that kind of to your advantage? Don't you have a conflict of interest when you're advocating for censorship on the internet? The answer is obviously yes, but they don't ever point that out.
Right. Among the maybe some of the bad stuff about the internet, one of the great things was it gave people a playing field. A politician that you couldn't talk to, you could yell at on Twitter. I mean, part of it is not great and healthy, but part of it is hilarious and epic. Like, you know, Kathy Lee Griffin's annoying you, you actually can respond to her. So this gave the people the power in the way that they claim to want to give people power. And now they're all mad. Like, for instance, in music, 10 years ago, you pretty much have to go through a major label. It's very difficult to make it. Now I could upload it to TuneCore or DistroKid for $9, and people like me and Bryson Gray are experiencing some sort of censorship, especially Bryson, where it's like now he's able to compete with a major label and get as many streams as their artist or more, but now they're using hate speech and censorship to say that that's bad, but not when Eminem talks about murdering his wife or, you know, all these weird like storytelling lyrics. That's fine. And drug promotion's fine, and gang promotion's fine, and murder's fine. But, you know, Bryson talking about something in the LGBT department's too much. You know, this is absolutely the elites realizing that they don't have the power to control everybody, and they're control freaks.
Well, and once again, evidence that ultimately, if you are ever provided a free market, then meritocracy will win out. I mean, you guys are supremely talented. I don't want to inflate your ego here, but honest to God, I believe that you guys would be huge if you had the push of record labels. But because of the internet, it's allowed people like you and I to get our voices out there and to grow an audience. And they don't like it. And I don't blame them. You know, if I was in their position, I wouldn't want young upstarts to be able to come up and mess with their game. So it makes sense, but it's just the fact that they couch it in morals and principles and suppressing hate speech and all this other nonsense. It's like, you know what you're really doing. You don't want competition. It's a story as old as time. Every monopoly or oligopoly has always done whatever they can, and that usually includes using the government to suppress dissident voices and competitors. And it's the same exact thing we're witnessing today. Same thing that happened with Kanye West this week, and suspended from Twitter and Instagram within hours of each other. It's like, yeah, I mean, they say, oh, he's it's hate speech to point out that there are some nefarious cabal of people that are suppressing speech on the internet, especially if you get out of line. And it doesn't matter what your skin tone is, it's the narrative. It's not what you look like, it's what you're actually saying. Because obviously Kanye and Bryson are African American. It's like, they don't care. That's not what it's about. They want monolithic thought.
And I know you said you didn't want to boost my ego, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, censorship is actually anti-me. It's censorship is anti-me and anti-you. So this is a new, censorship is hate speech, in my opinion, because
thank you.
It goes against me, and I care.
We need the government to suppress the.
I care about myself like Kanye cares about himself. But speaking of Kanye, I wanted to play this clip. It's hilarious. Tucker Carlson asked him how close his wife was to the Clintons, and I just thought his answer was super funny. Let's take a watch.
How close was she to the Clintons?
I mean, cell phone away, like, or hey, tell Ye to say this away, or hey, go out and use your platform to push the vaccination away. I mean, not away, but like take the away part. But
do you feel like?
I love how he says, push the vaccine away, and then he goes like this, and Kanye does this funny thing. There's a lot of memes about it where he'll be smiling huge, and then he'll just go like that, like right in a split second. He goes from smiling huge to just looking ticked off. It's so funny.
It's very strange. Do you think that's like insecurity? Because I can't get a read on what he's doing.
Kanye? No, I think he's probably used to people not giving him fair interviews. This is just my guess, like based on mainstream media. So when Tucker actually doesn't hate him, and is allowing him to speak, I feel like it's almost like a jerk reaction of like, did I do, because I've watched some of these left-wing interviews with Lil Wayne, And it's crazy. Like, I don't even care your politics. Like, talk to me like I'm not a piece of garbage or like a normal person. Like, their setup is the craziest thing. It would be like, Clint, as somebody who's been slightly affiliated / not affiliated, but I'm going to say you've been affiliated with neo-Nazis, gang members, this, that. Like, why do you want to kill people with COVID-19 and through climate change? Like, why are you a murderer? And like, at that point, you're just like pissed off because you're like, what? You're like, I didn't even get to talk and you've painted me. So I don't know if that's what it is, but it's like, I almost just think he's trained to think the media's like, he's like smiling at them. But it might just be his thing too. I don't know. He's a wild guy.
I think that's actually a good read. And for the record, I think Kanye is like arguably the greatest artist of my lifetime. I'm a huge Kanye West fan, and I disagree with him on a handful of things politically, but I absolutely love anybody who bucks the narrative. And the fact that he's doing it so courageously, well, he's a mogul, man. I mean, that dude is absolutely crushing it with his fashion line, not to mention his music over the past 20 years. It's incredible the courage that he has to speak out. And unfortunately, I think that it's almost incumbent that he be a little mentally off to like have this level of courage. I mean, some people say that it's just his faith and his religion, and perhaps that's all it is. But I have definitely seen enough of an emotional tumult within him that it makes me feel as if he is dealing with some demons too. But it's really beautiful that he's trying to funnel that into a positive message, and one that's like just courageous, just infinitely courageous. It really blows my mind.
I think in order to be great at something, like Michael Jordan was like a psychotic gambler and like also just like very, would take things very personally. Like I love their documentary, but how are you going to be the greatest? You have to be crazy good, crazy strict. Kobe Bryant was at the gym at 8 p.m. Yeah, he's athletic, but what made him Kobe Bryant was his work ethic. So I think in order to be crazy successful, you have to believe in yourself and be a little weird. Like I'm a little weird. So the way Kanye talks, it reminds me of kind of like freestyling. Like he'll jump from topic to topic sometimes, which can annoy people because it can be like, I'll just answer the question, but he's just kind of like free flowing and not really planning what he's saying. And I agree. I think that's what he saw in Trump. And I thought that was probably, I mean, there's a lot of really good parts of the interview, but I think the most revealing was like Tucker's like, why did you want to start speaking out? He was like, even though I became successful, I took it from $0 to a multi-billionaire. I wasn't free to say that I thought Trump was cool and I like Trump. So he's like, what's the point of being rich and successful and a rock star if you can't even speak the truth? Like, this is why people want to get successful. Of course, some people want money and girls and fame and attention and credit. But a lot of people, it's like, okay, well, now at least I'm also free to travel, free to not go to work. And Kanye's like, as one of the richest people in the country, I'm not even free to say what I think about a political, election where Hillary is not a great person anyway. Like, you can't like the other person.
Well, especially when you're only presented with two options. It's like, so basically I'm canceled if I support one of the two options you're presenting.
Exactly. That's the craziest part about it. It's not like you have 1,000 options and you're like, I want, it's like Hillary Clinton. It's like, no. And then that guy who's literally kind of just like going off the cusp, being funny, like Trump was saying. Yeah. I remember watching the debate, the second debate, and I was like, dang, like, because I'd heard all the propaganda about Trump. I can't say I was a fan of him at the time, but because I knew how, who Hillary was, I was like, I mean, this is kind of epic having that guy kind of just talk to her that way. I was like, this is pretty cool.
Hell yeah. Oh, dude. Yeah, no, that was definitely the thing I loved most about Trump's presidency, is that he was just like, whatever your holy thing is, I'm going to just blast it.
Right.
and I feel the same way about Kanye. Like, even when I disagree with these people, I love how, like, and I love the ad lib, what you pointed out, like, it's freestyle. It's a perfect metaphor to describe it. Because you don't get truth if you're not kind of like off the cuff. If it's all prepared talking points, I don't even really want to hear it. Like like what we're doing right now, this is all ad lib. This is the type of conversations I enjoy. I feel like this is what the new market is actually wanting. It's obvious. I mean, Joe Rogan Experience, 3 hours, pure ad lib. Like that's what people want to hear, because they're so sick of the cultivated, crafted narrative that we're all fed. And I love the Elon Musk and the Donald Trumps and the Kanye West of the world. Even though I'm not a Republican, it's just like, I love to hear people that are thinking and saying stuff off the top of their head, as opposed to being, this fine-tuned product that I'm being sold.
And this is what really ticks me off about the media because, and this is what bothered me in 2016, even before I knew my politics. It's like I was always a compassionate, thoughtful person. And I was like, okay, if you don't like Donald Trump, I don't care. But are you really going to not try to look at 70 million people and try to feel why they feel? Maybe they're broke and he's going to help with this. Or maybe they lost money from Obamacare, like my family. You know, they weren't a fan of it because their specific health care was kind of tarnished versus other people might have been enjoyed Obamacare. And I wouldn't demonize them for that because it's all
Sure.
what happens to you. So anyway, I'm just seeing how they're treating people and talking about people. And I'm like, it's so evil to just paint everybody in one way, know that it's wrong, and then just try to quash, all dissent. Like, they talk like they have a stick up their butt. Like when you hear a politician, it's like, I talk like a Barack Obama. Like it's so obviously fake. It's just stupid. And then when we say it's fake, they're like, no, that's what you want to prefer that. Like, no, of course I prefer listening to Donald Trump talk because he sounds at least like he's connecting and like real versus a prepared speech. Like who, and their hate for people who don't want that type of lie just shows what liars they are. Like that's normal. Like ew.
I think at the base layer of the red pill is realizing that almost everything you've received in your life has been a cultivated narrative scripted thing. And just like that's the first realization that people have. The news, the Hollywood, the political class, it's like we just recognize these people are not telling us the truth. Like whatever you think the extent of the lie, that's like different layers of the red pill. But at the base level, like the first realization most people have is I am not being told the truth. And I'm just so grateful that more and more people are clamoring for kind of an ad lib off the top of the head. Like just tell me what you think, man. Like that's all I want to hear. Like you could be wrong. I would rather you tell me what you actually think and be wrong than give me a cultivated thing that I agree with.
Right.
And like most people don't feel that way, but I think more and more are starting to.
Right. We're going to talk about Ukraine and Russia for the rest of the time because it's this massive war going on. It's escalating. And recently, the news report is, and I want to be very clear because, first of all, a lot of media lies. They lied about the Ghost of Kiev, the Snake Island story. I'm not saying they're lying about this. I think there really is an attack in Ukraine, but I try to now wait. I give it like the couple-day rule where I don't want to have a huge opinion about, because they might have attacked Zelensky's office. There's reports of that. They might have not, though. They're attacking civilians. I believe that could be true, but it could. So long story short, we'll figure out exactly what the attack is, and it can be traced far, far back. But I want to kind of start with recent escalations, get your opinion, then we'll talk about, our perception on it. So, there's been back and forth sanctions and attacks and special ops and people taking certain land. That's been happening. But to me, major escalations were the pipeline blowing up, and we don't know who did that. And then the Crimea bridge, terrorist attack where somebody exploded or blew something up on a bridge and tried to pretty much destroy a bridge with civilians on it. And then also the assassination of Dugina's daughter. This is someone very close to Putin. Somebody killed his daughter. So these are massive things that are so crazy evil and so crazy corrupt, even in a time of like half-baked war, that the U.S. intelligence communities and New York Times even admitted they disagreed with that. They didn't do it, according to them. And they talked to Ukraine about it. So it's pretty messed up when even the U.S. intelligence community says, hey, we had no part in that, and we talked to them. So, this is stuff Ukraine's doing, and then Russia retaliates, and now the media, I guess, is going to act oblivious like all those things I mentioned never happened.
No, you're exactly right. And that's the narrative we're already seeing today because they don't give it the 48-hour rule. And unfortunately, that forces our hand to commentate earlier than we would probably prefer to. But you're exactly right. They're essentially describing everything Putin's doing today as overt terrorist attacks, but they don't reference the fact that a private citizen, Arya Dugina, was assassinated. And according to our State Department, it was done by the Ukrainian, some branch of their military, I would imagine. Not to mention the attack on the pipeline and the attack on what amounts to a civilian bridge, and three, from early reports, it was 3 civilians that were killed in that attack. So it's like, look, war is hell. This is why I'm so deeply anti-war. It's like just because I bring up the fact that the U.S. has been involved in promulgating this war, and because I will explain that there are some genuine issues that have been presented to the Russians that ought to be at least considered in this equation. People will assume that I'm like justifying the invasion. I am not. I want this to end, and I didn't want it to begin in the first place. And the only reason I bring up those countervailing topics is because I have to present a whole picture. Otherwise, you will just be, walk like a dog right into World War III. And it seems like that's what their intention is. And it drives me absolutely crazy, man. It's tragic. And we are now stuck in an escalatory cycle between the two biggest nuclear powers on the planet. That's not an overstatement. That's exactly what they are. And we're not having a serious adult conversation about what that amounts to. And that's insane.
And a lot of people don't understand this, but I'm going to break it down in a way that's more relatable than Russia and Ukraine and easier to understand. Say me and Clint are standing next to each other, and I punch him in the arm, 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 and then I punch him harder, and then he just whacks me in the face and does something way crazier than I did. But then I sit there and say, why'd you do that? And then he said, well, you punched me in the arm 15 times for 10 years. And then I said, no, I didn't. You're a terrorist. You did that for no reason. I'm the liar. It doesn't necessarily, I mean, it's debatable morally. Should he have been able to hit me harder? I personally believe yes. If you're violated, you don't have to equal somebody's force. You can send the message to get away from me, and defend yourself. So this is the Ukrainian war. I'm not saying Russia's innocent and they've never done anything. But if you go back to, and I put it on my phone, they called it the Revolution of Dignity. And I just wanted to verify, according to Wikipedia, this is other places too. I know Wikipedia is not the greatest source, but even they're admitting that 130 individuals from both sides of the conflict died during the event. So the Revolution of Dignity, I believe it was 2014 in Ukraine. It was a coup/insurrection, like a real one, not like a photo op / just sloppy Trump rally turned into like a, hissy fit where it goes wrong. Like actually hundreds of people died, like a real insurrection, not the fake one that the media acts was as bad as this. But the media supports that insurrection. They call it the Revolution of Dignity. I mean, this is a great thing to the Western media. So I just assume that what happened during that coup/revolution was they got rid of a leader who was more pro-Russia and established a government that was anti-Russia and more pro-West. And then you have videos of Lindsey Graham flying over with a bunch of other American politicians. I think Amy Klobuchar was there and John McCain. And they were essentially waging war on Ukraine, saying, we're giving you weapons. Now's the time to fight. Very, very pro-war rhetoric in 2016 before Trump got into office. Imagine if China flew to Mexico, gave them weapons and said, let's fight America and take back Texas. You don't think we would be, or some form of that, some form of our enemies going to our border? So to act, and this is what the Ukraine flag and the bio-brainwash people don't understand. I'm not pro-Russia. I'm not necessarily pro-Ukraine. I love the people. I think there's great people in both countries, and I don't look negatively on any ethnic group or country in the world like that. However, if you want to solve this conflict, it's the same thing that I just said about the Clint thing. If I hit him a bunch of times and you really want peace, I got to say, hey, I don't appreciate what you just did, Russia, but I do admit that I did a few things and I'll stop doing it. But Ukraine doesn't want to stop doing it. The West doesn't want to stop doing it. They've instigated this war. They've brought it about. And then they act shocked every time there's a retaliation for all of their actions, which were almost begging for retaliation. So the whole thing is a passive aggressive lie that can only be solved through truth. We don't want Russia to win, and we don't want them to take Ukraine and Poland. That's not what we want. We want the war to stop, but it's never going to stop until Ukraine and America and our allies admit what they're doing. If they don't, you're not supporting peace with the Ukraine flag in the bio. You're supporting war.
Oh, man, you said that so beautifully. I don't know that I have much to add other than to say everything you said there is true. And I think that the biggest thing we're lacking in this environment is truth about what's actually occurred in this war. And that's tragic, because ultimately it does boil down to, are the American people, because whatever you believe about this war, I'm going to make a claim here that's very adamant. This war is not happening if the U.S. doesn't want it to be happening. And that's, I can prove that out. In fact, I'm doing an episode called The War They Wanted on Liberty Lockdown. It'll be out tomorrow, nice. where I lay out the entire history of this. So if people want more of the history, they can check that out. But this is what they wanted. John McCain and Lindsey Graham were over there in 2014 and for I think it was 16 as well. And they're meeting with the, quote unquote, Ukrainian military, basically imploring them to be as antagonistic towards Russia and ultimately go to war. It looks like they wanted war in 2016 and they didn't get it because Donald Trump became president. And I think that's ultimately what we're witnessing is a multi-decade plan where Hillary Clinton was supposed to be the president and they were going to get their war against Russia, and it didn't happen because Donald Trump out of the blue won. And I think that's the reason that this is happening now, is that they got their guy in power and now they're running it again. So the reason I'm so concerned about this is, like, look, I don't want any war on the planet. I am anti-war, period. But when it comes to nuclear holocaust, it is absolutely mandatory that we all be having a open, honest conversation about not just what happened there, but what the escalatory cycle naturally means between two nuclear powers. You have a bordering territory, Ukraine, that is being threatened to be added towards NATO, which would mean that any invasion of Russia into that territory would be an Article 5 violation, which means automatically World War III. Russia and Putin have said repeatedly for a decade plus that is a red line that they cannot allow to happen. And the American government has repeatedly pushed them and threatened to put them into NATO. So this was an inevitability. Like, it requires some adult in the room to sit down and go, do we all want to die or don't we? Because if the answer is no, we have to stop. Putin is not going to stop. He is not going to allow Ukraine to be a NATO territory. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. We wouldn't allow it to happen either. And I don't even blame him for not being willing to accept that. So it's time to get real.
What I've been telling, yeah, amen. What I've been telling people with America's involvement, even if you're watching this, say you're from Ukraine, you're pro-Ukraine, you disagree with my takes, that's fine. I want you to hear what I'm saying because it's going to be real. America and our allies, I love our country, I love a lot of our allies, we're waging the most passive-aggressive war possible. Even if you support Ukraine and you want them to beat Russia, you should be annoyed at America too, because on one hand, we're not adding them to NATO because we know it would be World War III, and we don't want that. So we're trying to act as if we're not really helping Ukraine as we're helping Ukraine. For instance, we condemn certain terrorist attacks like the assassination of Dugina, and even our intelligence communities, they know that's too far, even for them, which is crazy because there's not a lot of things that are too far for them, but that's too far for even them. And that was the first time I actually had I was like, wow, that's shocking that they are condemning that to a certain extent. But, at the same time, they're providing, and we're providing now, weapons defense systems for the retaliation. So we're not going to help you do your terrorism in other countries because we disagree with it. But we're going to watch you do it, and then you're going to get retaliated, and then we're going to give you the defense systems for the retaliation. America, whether you're pro-Ukraine, you think they're scamming us, it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. America is waging the most passive-aggressive fake war in history because we're acting as if we're not part of it. Even the Ukrainians are like, why aren't we helping more? Why aren't we giving them air, this and that? It's like, because we're phonies. I don't know what to tell you. It's like either we're all in or we're all out, but we're not. We're just like letting it get worse and worse and worse, and then being like, we're not doing it. I mean, you really
I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
Yeah, you want to choose one side or the other. I'm not pro-war, but it's like, you're fighting war. Oh, no, we're not. No, we're not. We're just, we wouldn't do that. It's like, then what are you doing if you're not doing that? Either Ukraine and NATO is going to try to steamroll and fight Russia. Russia's going to do that and get the regions they want. If you're not willing to give them their regions and you're going to start attacking their bridges and providing defense for people attacking their bridges, you're getting involved in a war. You got to come to the table and say, we'll take this and we'll take this. But Ukraine and our allies don't want to do that because we won't even admit what we're truly doing. So it's annoying.
I think you nailed it again. I mean, it's basically they're trying to do everything they can to antagonize Russia to commit harsher and harsher acts of war. Some people will call it terrorism, whatever you want to call it. It's all, death of innocence, and I hate it. But they want to make it so that, at least from the media perception and narrative on this, that Russia is an unadulterated aggressor and the Ukrainians are the victims. And the story of any war is never that simple. And it's not that simple in this situation as well. So the reason that, we'll condemn when they assassinate a private citizen, but then we turn around and we provide them the defenses so that when Russia retaliates, they can defend themselves. Well, you're basically, it's like your dog takes a crap on the carpet and then you yell at it and then you pet it. It's like,
Right,
it's
right,
like,
right.
it's like you're sending mixed messages, and ultimately it ends up with. And I know that some of the Ukrainians will get upset. I'm not referring to the Ukrainian people. I'm referring to the government here. But it's just like they're trying to make Putin and Russia do something brash and rash, and then they turn around and say, "Look, we told you he was evil. We told you. Now we have to, add Ukraine and NATO, and then we'll have our justification for World War III." And I just think that has to be at the top of everyone's list when it comes to voting in the midterms or what you're going to demand of your politicians that are in power today. Be demanding peaceful negotiations. The State Department in America has not picked up the phone to talk to Russian leadership in like 7 or 8 months, something crazy like that. Like there has to be open lines of communication when you have two nuclear powers that
Right.
are using this other territory as a proxy war. You have to pick up the phone. It's insane that they are not talking.
Right. It's either going to be war or diplomacy. And when I say, hey, I would love if they figured it out, literally, like you could say just that. And you see these blue checkmark Ukrainian like officials and stuff being like, screw you, and I'm like, I'm supporting you. I just want war to stop. Like it's insane
Right.
how mad that makes them. I found that clip. I loaded it up. So here's Lindsey Graham in 2016 in Ukraine. Imagine if this was China in Mexico or Canada saying this about America when you watch that clip.
Your fight is our fight.
Ваша боротьба – це наша боротьба.
2017 will be the year of offense.
Рік 2017 рік буде ріком нападу.
All of us will go back to Washington and we will push the case against Russia.
Ми всі повернемося до Вашингтону і ми будемо відстоювати санкції проти Росії.
Enough of a Russian aggression.
Досить вже російської агресії.
It is time for them to pay a heavier price.
Час вже щоб вони заплатили важчу ціну.
I believe you will win. I am convinced you will win, and we will do everything we can to provide you with what you need to win.
Я вірю в те, що ви виграєте, переможете. Я переконаний в тому, що ви переможете, і ми вам допоможемо всіма можливими засобами.
Це те ж саме гільзи з ворожих БМП, які розмальовані художництвом Бердянська.
З Новим роком, дорогі мої!
And don't get it twisted. I love America. I'm not pro Russia or anything, but it's like and I know, Clint knows this, and so do a lot of people watching. We've invaded multiple countries. We have bases around the world. We've gotten involved in several countries that didn't want us there, didn't ask for us there. So the sheer irony of us, first of all, going to Ukraine in 2016, saying this is the year of offense, getting involved in two countries' war, and then when Russia invades an area that's been heavily conflicted for a decade and has a lot of pro-Russian people and votes pro-Russian in the elections, it wouldn't be that. I mean, I know Ukraine wants it, but it wouldn't. They love it so much. Oh, we love Crimea. Then why did you bomb the bridge? If you thought that was part of your country, why would you bomb your own country? So I don't believe that they actually even like the people there that much. If they're willing to bomb a bridge, would I do that? Of course not. So look,
they've been bombing Donbass forever too. So it's like these are the territories that are now pro-Russian, and I can't blame the people that are voting that direction. Now there's lots of arguments as to whether or not those elections are legitimate. I'm not going to throw my hat in the ring one way or the other than to say that if I was being bombed by my own government, I would probably want to be part of the neighboring government too.
Right. And with America, it seems like for me as a person, if I'm playing a sport or I'm doing music or I'm doing news analysis, at the end of the day, my opinion about everybody else, that's cool. But really, I need to make sure I'm doing good work, and I need to make sure that I'm holding myself accountable because that's important. So as a country, I think the same exact way. When we're invading dozens of countries, but then we say it's too far for a country with a shared history with millions of its people in a city to take a city that they already want, it's like we're not the ones who could say that. Iran, yeah, it's tough there. I'm sorry. And I wish I could help and make a better thing. But when we're suffering from our own social problems here, the left thinks racism's running rampant with the George Floyd thing. The right wing thinks we're degenerate with the LGBT mafia taking over the schools. Both parties agree that they don't even like their own country that much socially. Yet we're going to go to another country and tell them how to act like us when we don't even want to act like us. I just don't understand what people are thinking.
Well, and then, I mean, consider the way the media is describing Russia's attacks on Kiev today as these overt acts of aggression and terrorism. Let me run a clip of I don't have it ready to play, but just mentally run the clip of shock and awe in 2002 and 3 in Iraq, or when we were flattening their entire infrastructure, a country that had absolutely zero to do with 9/11, and that was the pretext for which we invaded them. So I'm sorry, we don't have the moral high horse. We don't have the high ground here to inform the rest of the world how they're supposed to deal with their conflicts locally. It's insane that we even pretend that we have the moral authority to say what someone 6,000 miles away is allowed to do or not. And I just think that it's ultimately bankrupting this nation too. So just from the American vantage point, like if you actually care about America, well, this is not sustainable. And ultimately, you can't win a war between the two biggest nuclear powers. That amounts to either you have cooler heads prevail and you have diplomacy, or you have a nuclear holocaust. Like, where's the win? Where's the I mean, do you honestly believe that Russia's just going to put its tail between its legs and go back to having their territory be surrounded by NATO? Like, the answer is not going to be yes to that. They're not going to do it. I'm sorry. I know that's what people think, that they're just going to pressure them into accepting. It's not reality. They're going to get some portion of Ukraine. That is the ultimate conclusion of this. The alternative is nuclear Armageddon. So let's get real. If the people in the east of Ukraine want to be a part of Russia, let them go. It just seems like that's the obvious compromise position. And if the people there in particular are voting 90% favorability to doing so, that has to be the peaceful resolution. I know people don't like to hear it, but that's my honest opinion.
Right. No, I agree. Because in those regions, I know Donbass and Crimea, like, I understand why Ukraine doesn't want to lose land. I totally understand that. And I think they have the right to feel that way. But also this game, like you've been explaining and I've been explaining, where we're just pretending like we don't see it. Like, there haven't been bombs dropped. There aren't millions of people who support, a different government. I mean, a lot of the elections go both ways. And Zelensky was set to lose the next election to a party that was considered pro-Russian because they're next to Russia. So a lot of people don't see pro-Russia as, oh, I hate Ukraine. They see it as a peace thing because they know in their heads, either we get along with Russia right next to us or we're going to fight them. So imagine in your country if now you had an idea about Mexico or Canada and you loved America, but you said, hey, I think we should get along with Canada. I think we should get along with Mexico. Now you're deemed pro-Canada and pro-Mexico. Now you're not allowed to run against him. They ban your political party. They ban your media. I mean, this is really scary stuff, and it's happening in Ukraine right now. They're living under an authoritarian dictatorship where you're not allowed to try to seek a peace deal. And I'm not saying Russia's perfect, and I'm not saying they didn't do anything wrong, but Russia multiple times has come to the table and said, here's our deal. And Ukraine said, screw your deal, screw what you want, screw that. We're getting weapons, and we're going to fight for that land. So there is no peace deal until people admit what's going on.
No, you're right. And they had a peace deal, at least like a preliminary one. I think it was 6 months ago, and Boris Johnson, former UK prime minister, nixed it. And, he didn't do that without the direction of the U.S. State Department. So, like, once again, it's hard to see it any other way as the United States government wants this war to be everlasting. And if you know anything about the history of corruption in the Ukrainian government, particularly when it comes to the American political class and the Biden family particularly, you have to at least ask the question if this isn't largely about a money laundering operation that is our political establishment, both Democrat and Republicans. There's plenty of Republicans Mitt Romney and a bunch of the other old guard have family members that are making millions of dollars with their relationships with businesses in Ukraine. This is a very complicated story. And I hate that it's being portrayed as this like very simple, Putin's bad, aggression bad, this is it. It's like, no, man, like this is very, very complicated, and all the more reason that we shouldn't be involved with it. That's my opinion.
Well, like, imagine if there's you don't have to imagine, it's kind of somewhat happening, but like in America or anywhere where there's racial tension between quote unquote white people and quote unquote black people. If you were honest, whether you were white or black, you would have to come to the table and say, okay, what's your beef? What are you dealing with? Okay, I see that. Here's not you're bad, I'm good. Do you think that's going to end any war? We're the good people, you're the bad people. Everything you do is bad, everything we do is fine. It doesn't matter if we overstep, that's fine. You're asking for war. You're asking for racial war. So it's like that's the narrative of Ukraine, we're not saying that Putin's amazing. We're not saying that I like Ukrainians. I think they're epic. It's just, their government, their history. It's like our country. I don't like Joe Biden. Our government's a joke. It's not my fault. So, I don't blame them for what Zelensky's doing, but you can't possibly solve this conflict with such a minuscule understanding of it. And the Ukraine flag in the bio is the same thing as the safe of effective COVID vaccine ring around your profile, is the same thing as the black square for a month, and then you take it out. It's the same thing, not because Ukrainians are bad or it's bad to support the war. It's just this understanding of the war is actually escalating and causing the war. You are actually the warmonger, parading as the peace guy in the same way that people, putting their fist up and saying, this week was awesome when the country's burning down and people are getting their stores looted. You're not on the side of peace and love. You're on the side of looting billions of dollars of property damage and death.
Yeah, and then justifying it. Yeah, I think that's a good cognate or comparison. I think another example, especially given that we're not exactly living in a non-dictatorship style government. I mean, you have suppression of dissident speech here. I think that a good example would be like January 6th. It would be like if you were to say that there was no lead up for why those people behaved the way they did. It's like, it's not justifying it. It's not saying it was a good thing. It's not saying it was a righteous thing or the right thing to do. It's just saying, like, do you think history began on January 6th? Or is there a hell of a lot that went into that? Like questioning Trump's presidency and whether or not he was a Putin puppet and he was put in there by Russian bots and blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is all, it's so much deeper. And it's just like, until we get past the surface level narrative, we're not going to be able to have an intelligent conversation about that. And I don't think they want us to have it, which is why they're now suppressing people like you and I, as we just try and have a honest conversation where we go a little bit deeper into the history of these things. So hopefully we can avoid Armageddon. Like, why is that such a radical perspective?
Right. For absolutely. For Democrats too. And I realized this with Bernie and Trump. First with Bernie, I went to events and I realized that everybody didn't, and this is, I don't know if I wouldn't call it intelligence, but I would say like humility or compassion. I realized quickly everybody didn't like Bernie Sanders for the same reason I did. In fact, some people like the healthcare, and I identified as a not psychopath. Oh, everybody has their own reason. So when it came to Trump, even when I didn't like him before I started liking him, I was like, oh, everybody has an individual reason. They're not all bad people, even if some are, but then the media says, no, they're all bad. They're all evil. Your grandma's a demon. Like they treat people like garbage for 5 years. And that doesn't justify what some people do as a response. But really, if you do want to solve any conflict, you have to have the self-awareness and self-accountability to understand what role you play. The media is absolutely psychotic. The Democratic Party is absolutely psychotic. And in no way, shape, or form have they made any sort of attempt to do anything. And now you start to see, even on the right-wing media, I'll say it sometimes, some people aren't looking for peace either. It's like, you're a libtard, ha, ha, ha. Where I'm like, it's funny and it's appealing, but are you ever going to try to reach out to like 21-year-olds who are looking for a way? Or are you just going to throw them into the hands of the left wing by acting like hysterical like that? So I call out both sides, but yeah, I mean, I think the mainstream media, the way they treated Trump supporters for 4 years is absolutely insane. And they don't care. They're nasty people.
And then they talk about how there's like an uptick in the risk of domestic terrorism. It's like, you have already labeled 70 million people in this country, 70 million plus people in this country, because I'm going to include the libertarians in that, and any radical anti-war leftists too, as essentially potential domestic extremists. It's like, you guys are creating this environment. It is a whole cloth creation. You ignore us, you label us as potential terrorists, you label us as racists and Nazis and fascists and all these other things, when all we're seeking is basically like the American ideal of liberty, property, freedom and peace.
And it doesn't justify people doing evil or terrible acts. But like you said, if you're a government, like you lock people down for a year, right? This has crazy psychological, mental, and physical effects on people. It doesn't mean crime should spike that year, but let's say crime spikes that year and people are poor, so they're. I'm not saying every criminal is just poor, but it's like people start robbing, they go crazy, suicides go up, opioids go up. Are you going to sit there and say that you had no role in that as the government? Does that make me a bad person for noticing? I'm not saying if someone does something bad that I'm justifying it, but you're the government. You control society to a certain extent. So when you do something that affects people negatively, mentally, psychologically, and physically, and you want to take no role in the response to it, it's just not only evil, but it's you're lying to yourself. You know, it's a lie.
It's definitional gaslighting. I mean, it's like torturing someone and then wondering why they've lost their mind. It's like,
right.
It's like you guys are doing this to us. So if you could stop, then we could probably go back to being sane again. But because you've locked me in my house and you kept my kid home and you forced him to mask, and now he's no, he's out of shape because of climate change. It's like, no, he's not. He's out of shape.
Right.
He's out of shape because he wasn't able to,
Right.
hang out with his friends for the past 18 months. I mean, it is serious gaslighting. So when I see people getting radicalized, I think like the only way that you remedy that is to tell them the truth and tell them that they're not crazy. And I think that's why shows like Your and I have taken off, is because like we're actually having honest conversations, and we're allowing people that are having cognitive dissonance as they're witnessing all of this insanity happening on their TV screens and going like, yeah, you're not crazy, man. This shit is messed up. Like it
Right.
obviously is.
Dude, it's the best gaslighting example. It's sad that it's so funny, but like, like literally locking someone down, taking away their sports, taking away their gym, their activities, leaving them in the house to eat high fructose corn syrup. And then 3 months, like a year later, you're like, oh, climate change is making your kid fat. It's like, you couldn't possibly gaslight any harder than that.
It's so
like
crazy.
Climate change is causing heart issues. Like, yeah, sure. I always bring up the Anti-Defamation League on this as well. As somebody, I don't like hate, I don't like ethnic hate, and I don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable like that's a good person. So the Anti-Defamation League is like a 100-year-old Jewish organization founded by B'nai B'rith that's been around, I think, since 1913. And a lot of times they'll write reports every year that says like anti-Semitism is on the rise. Anti-Semitism is higher than it's been in a long time. It's like, well, if you're the organization that's supposed to lower it and it's increasing, maybe you're not doing a good job. And I'm not saying this from a place of hate. It's a place of love. Like, I actually want to see it go down, but maybe you're doing something wrong, because it's like a cop and, crime's at an all-time high in your town. It's like, maybe you're not doing good then, dude. No, it's everyone else's fault all the time. Maybe a little self-awareness and self-accountability would lower the hate instead of leaning on left-wing lies and censorship and doing exactly what you're claiming others are doing. That can't possibly be a good strategy. That's the same strategy they have in Ukraine. It's like, we're going to stop the war by making the war happen and then blaming everyone. It's like,
Yeah.
okay.
And their solution to anti-Semitism is usually cancel culture. It's like,
Right.
it's censorship and everything else. And it's like, if you haven't figured it out yet, that doesn't work. When you
Right.
suppress someone who thinks that they're being manipulated and that their speech is being culled or chilled or cultivated by some nefarious group, and then you can them and you suspend them from everywhere,
Right.
that just convinces them that they're right. And it doesn't just convince Kanye West, it convinces millions of his fans that like, oh
Right.
wait, maybe this is actually a thing. And unfortunately, I don't think that it has anything to do with some Jewish conspiracy. I think that is kind of a bigoted perspective to hold, but it is actually happening. But it's just not happening by some particular ethnic group. It's more like the establishment and the people that really control civilization. And unfortunately, that opens up the window to more racist versions of this conspiracy theory, which I obviously do hold.
What do you think, like, with, because I know certain people have been banned from Twitter for posting like FBI crime statistics, like they'll do, crime by race every year. And then if you say it in perhaps the wrong way, they'll ban you and say it's racist. And say with, a lot of media positions being holded by Jewish oligarchs, where obviously it's like, you're not going to blame everybody of a specific race, but where, at least for you personally, because everyone has a different threshold based on their own personal bias, their own, attitude. I know Jewish people that care less about anti-Semitism than non-Jewish people. It really depends on how big of, I'm not going to call everyone a snowflake, but like, where is your line? It's like comedy. Like, do you like really dark comedy, or does that bother you? Like, what's your line in this world? Everyone has a line, but where do you think the line is when it comes to talking about race, noticing patterns, and then, where does that turn into something that becomes more evil or hateful?
Well, I'm a free speech extremist, so like I think that you should be able to say whatever you want. I think that the way you ultimately can work people through the process of perhaps coming to some more racist assumptions or assessments as to these facts that they're looking at is to have an open dialogue about it. It's not to tell them, wait, I'm seeing this statistic that says like in cities, there's increase in particularly African American crime statistics, and then coming to some sort of conclusion about Black people more broadly. I think that that's a terrible conclusion to come to, and I think that if you are allowed to speak about it openly and honestly, you might actually be able to avoid going down the racist belief system. So I don't have any problem with anyone talking about it. I do think that if you see crime statistics and then you see a Black person on the street and you just assume that they're going to be a criminal, well, then you've probably gone a little bit too far in reading the FBI statistics, because I think that we're all individuals, and I think it's a mistake to extrapolate from crime statistics and just assume like that means something like because I'm white and I wear a red hat, does that mean I'm a Trump supporter? Like that would be stupid. So if I don't want you to do that to me, I'm not going to do that to some other person.
Right. As somebody that in most cases, I'm not in a protected class, but I do have the option of pretending like I am or identifying as for goodies. Like growing up, I'm mostly white. I'm obviously a man, but I am also part Puerto Rican. My grandma came from Puerto Rico. So, when I was in high school and college, they would tell me, and I never did it, but they would tell me, put down your Hispanic because you'll get more stuff. Like my privilege, ethnically was never in my white. Putting white on a piece of paper is like putting Asian. It's not going to help you in the education system get extra things. Hispanic will. So I kind of grew up knowing that, that was kind of my victim card if I wanted one to get extra things, but I never wanted to use it. That being said, now that I'm older, seeing that there is no anti-Christianophobe or, there's no word when people discriminate against Christians. I do see the double standards, and I find it interesting to say the least in different groups, all groups, where it's like, okay, you can say that basically Christians are running America and destroying America with their fundamental Christian, Caucasian values. But if someone says that about Jewish executives, then it's hate speech. But it's not hate speech when you say it about me. So I thought Cerno had a good take on it, where he's like, if you think it's racist or whatever, Christophobe to say that about Christians, then I'll listen to your take about anti-Semitism. But if you're doing that, but then the reverse hurts you, that's where I feel like, Kanye and this sort of stuff kind of, and even like the being against BLM and stuff, I see it kind of boiling to the forefront. And I'm like, it is fascinating that just the sheer double standards of what people would consider racist or anti-religion as somebody that really pretty much has no protection or victim card to really play.
Well, I think what people need to realize is like collectivism and racism, everybody gets their turn at the whipping post. Like there was a lot of Christians, Christian community won't like me for saying this, but there was a lot of Christians that wanted Muslims in particular to be targeted by, TSA and NSA after 9/11. And
right. Agreed.
They thought that was fair. They thought, hey, we were attacked by Muslims, so this is what they get now. Well, now it's your turn at the whipping post. And this is why I oppose giving the government the power to pursue people based off of their racial or religious makeup. And I think that ultimately it comes for everybody. And the same thing is now happening with Trump supporters. Many of them wanted a very strong FBI and CIA and the Patriot Act and everything else. It's like, well, now you're in in jail for over a year awaiting trial. You're basically being held as an enemy combatant. It's like, this is what happens. And this is why I oppose collectivism and I oppose the government more broadly, is because I realize no matter how good you think it is as it goes after your enemy, it eventually will come for you too.
Right. No, that's a brilliant point. I think the Patriot Act was crazy. A lot of people nowadays, like, I think there were a lot of truthers back then who opposed it. I know I opposed it at the time. But sure. Like you said, I would say the mainstream Republican probably did it. And there was probably propaganda from, I'm not going to say Sean Hannity because I don't know what his stance was, but I would assume that he was pro-Patriot Act.
Oh, I watched it,
right?
and he was very pro-Patriot
Right.
Act. Yeah.
I think a lot of these, Trump small government guys didn't do that. So I think that is, like you said, and if you're another ethnic group or you're a left-wing whatever, and you're trying to stop the fascists or the Trumps or whatever it is, the same way that this is coming against Trump supporters and Republicans, that's going to go against you as well. So, yeah.
Do you want President DeSantis in charge of the FBI?
Right.
Like, is that really what you want?
But talking to a left winger sometimes, not all, but some, their lack of logic is so astounding where I actually have to ask myself, okay, it's almost like you caught somebody stealing from your store. Like, you did it. Because I talked to this one guy. He was a progressive guy who didn't like Trump, talked about racism. He was a black guy. Doesn't really matter. I'm just giving perspective on, like, who he was and what he's talking about. Like, oh, this was that, that's too much. I don't like when you say that. Whatever. Okay. So I said, are you okay with Russia banning the political parties and all this stuff and being like authoritarians? And he said, yeah, because Russia invaded and there's a war. So I said, would you be okay if that happened in America? And he said, yeah. I was like, you'd be okay if Donald Trump was president, right? Big, bad, racist Donald Trump, who you think hates you and Hispanics or whatever. And he's now the president, and someone invades from Mexico, and Donald Trump used that as an excuse to be an authoritarian. You're fine with that? And he said, yeah. Dude, I know you're not. I wouldn't be fine with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're a left-winger who hates Trump, and you're trying to justify what Ukraine did by lying to me as a grown man and saying that you'd support an authoritarian Trump banning the Democratic Party. Yeah. And he's like, yeah. Bro, like, at this point, you remind me of a kid who got caught stealing. You're lying. I know you're lying. Just drop the shtick. But that's why I tend to like right-wingers more than left-wingers. They're not all honest. They're not all right. But it seems like the left-winger's the one to just lie all the time. And it's like, at least have a bad take that I disagree with. Or, I can't take this, like, passive-aggressive, phony, like, you can't be a grown man lying to me like that. It's annoying.
No, I agree, man. I mean, that's the whole problem, is that we're all lying too often, is because we're trying to either fit into like the community social media narrative of like, okay, I'm with this group or I'm with this group. This is why I'm not really tribal at all. I upset even though I am a libertarian, I upset the libertarian community half the time with what I have to say. It's like, I'm just going to tell you the truth all the time. And, maybe I'll be wrong, but I think that in the long run, I will be right more often than wrong, just because I'm actually seeking truth. I'm not seeking approval. I'm not seeking in-group acceptance. I'm not trying to virtue signal. And, I feel like the world would be a better place if more people did that. It's not very popular right now, but I think it's going to become more popular as more and more people realize, civilization and culture more broadly is degrading because we're not telling the truth to one another.
You upset me when you said that the government shouldn't give people money and pay for stuff, because I think Joe Biden owes me $1 trillion based on the psychological abuse that I've suffered during his presidency. I do believe I would deserve reparations for media assault. And
I'll say this, Doug, if anyone deserves reparations, it's the American people after the lockdown scheme. I mean, those are real people that really suffered in modern day. This is not historical slights from people that are long dead. This is like, so, I think there's an argument to be had. Unfortunately, the only way that they would ever pay it is through the printing press, which means that we're ultimately getting our currency inflated. So there is no reparations, man.
Maybe we can do reparations where it's like if Joe Biden had a car that he drove or something, or someone drove for him, like, he could just give me the car. This way we don't print more money. Or like, Trevor Noah or Jimmy Kimmel, like, they could just gift me like a watch or something, like a Rolex, something that they have laying around somewhere. This way, because I hear you, I don't want to inflate the currency and hurt everybody. Dude, but I do want something.
Yeah, well, I think that the when they tweeted out from the Biden's account with him talking about electric cars, but then it's him in a 2022 Corvette, which is like a gas guzzling car, which, by the way, I own one. I would like to have you get a matching Corvette so that we can go rip up Miami, dude. Sounds great.
I for sure deserve a Corvette, like a matching Corvette. That sounds 100%. Good. Maybe
greatest car I've ever driven. You need it.
Thanks for joining. Where can people find you? Thank you guys, everybody, for watching. Share this video if you liked our take on it, and I'll give you a few links at the end. But first, I'm going to get my guest.
Yeah, Clint Russell, Liberty Lockdown. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all over the place. Just search Liberty Lockdown, and then at Liberty Lock Pod on Twitter if you want to follow me. We're north of 52,000 now, so I'm coming up in the world.
Awesome. And guys, these beanies are out for the fall. DreamRare.com. We got the blue ones. We got the black ones. Black and blue, but not like a bruise. Oh my gosh, a bruise. Come on, guys. I don't understand why I haven't been signed by Comedy Central yet, but yeah, DreamRare.com. We appreciate you, and thank you for your perspective too. We'll read some of the comments after this video on Facebook or YouTube. This is a Dream Rare podcast. Search it anywhere things are found. And my new song is coming out Friday. New song and video with Bryson Gray. It's called All My Friends Are Shadow Banned. So if you would like, you can look in the description, pre-order it for 99 cents on Amazon. And that would be a great gift. My birthday's Wednesday. 99 cents. You can make me happy. We're trying to hit #1 on the Billboard charts out of all millions of songs. So appreciate you guys.
Support independent creators. Make sure you support Bryson Gray and Anomaly and get that track. And also later this month, I have Alex Jones and Dr. Joseph Ladapo, who was just suspended from Twitter for telling the truth about the vax. So make sure people don't miss those ones.
Oh, epic. I love that guy. That's DeSantis' Surgeon General, frontline doctor.
Yep.
Legendary. I'm going to listen to that one.
Hell yeah.
All right. Thank you for joining. Have a good one, guys.